I guess just for a quick bit of context, so I'm a current PhD student. I'm kind of based out of the Centre for Research on Learning and Innovation, which is in the School of Education, and I also work a bit in the School of Psychology. And yeah, I basically wanted to cover two things in this quick 15-minute talk. One was to look at this question of, why learning through questioning is effective and a bit of a psychological perspective on that, because I'm definitely more in the kind of research end of things. I'm not teaching any courses involving PeerWise at the moment, so I wanted to give that perspective. But additionally, the other hat I kind of wear is as one of the two co-conveners for the Student Partnerships Special Interest Group, along with Pauline Ross, who's here. Basically, these special interest groups are, these little groups within the Centre for Research on Learning and Innovation that we kind of want to highlight and support research and kind of dissemination of ideas on various topics. And so the one I'm involved with is the Student Partnerships Special Interest Group. So you can find us online with that link up there. And I guess just broadly, the kind of student partnerships philosophy that we kind of support is this idea of treating students as more partners and co-designers of educational experience, sort of valuing their agency a lot more in education. And clearly, there's a lot of parallels with that in the kind of PeerWise discussions today. So this is why I kind of bring this up. I'll sort of, I guess broadly, just go over the sort of aims of the group. So situated within the centre, we are a research centre, so we do want to support research, and we sort of work to develop partnerships with various people teaching around the university. So we've done a bunch with Gareth and some other people, so doing research around this kind of thing. We also want to support the dissemination of ideas that might be relevant for educators, and also just lobby more broadly for the adoption of kind of student partnerships like philosophies within education. So and a couple upcoming things. So I've been recently producing a bunch of short videos highlighting various academics around the university and some ideas related to student partnerships. So I'll just briefly summarize these, but these will be kind of released soon, and we'll let you know about them. So we've got people like Peter Bryant discussing students as creators and sort of community-focused higher education. We've got Peter Ryman talking about the learning sciences perspective and the peer tutoring effect. We've got Judy Kay talking about human-centered technology and kind of, as she was discussing today, how technology can in particular kind of help communication between students and educators and this sort of thing. We also filmed Susan Potter, who had the experience of co-designing a curriculum with students. So she shared her experience with that. We have Jennifer Rowley talking about community engagement as well, so like partnerships between institutions and communities and the students involved with that, and plus a whole bunch more. We've also just launched a kind of discussion topic where we're looking at highlighting projects and ideas around bringing learners together with technology, so I encourage you to visit the website and engage with that link. We're still planning some speakers to come later on in the year, but we're looking at getting Kelly Matthews, for example, down quite soon. And Kelly's a great advocate for student partnerships and various ideas. So yeah, there'll be more info on that soon. If you're interested, we'll have a proper kind of sign-up thing, but in the meantime, just can contact with me. Okay, so back to the question at hand. So I wanted to look at a few different perspectives of like thinking about what questions are in terms of a learning tool from the kind of learning scientist perspective, which I bring. So perspective one, so we can think of a question as, a sort of diagnostic tool for finding out how much you understand about something. So this is from the perspective of someone answering a question. A question is something that can help yourself find out more about what you know. So like if we kind of represent this schematically, if we imagine these nodes represent what someone understands, well, these kind of grey boxes are kind of like represent our sort of lack of understanding of what we actually understand. And in a sense, a good question can kind of help clear this up a bit. And why is this useful? Quite naturally, understanding what you do or do not know is really the basis for, asking for help, knowing what to study next, so being more efficient with what you study. And in general, in kind of the student partnerships philosophy, like sort of self-understanding of your knowledge and your knowledge progression is really at the basis of this more kind of student-led kind of giving students greater autonomy in their learning. So if they know what they do or do not know, then they can seek out the next steps there a lot more effectively. So, questions really good for this. Then there's a question, there's lots of different ways you can find out, the extent to which you know something. And I just briefly wanted to touch on, some great research in experimental psychology that's really shown that we're rather terrible at assessing how much we really know about something. So we quite often tend to overestimate what we understand, and certain kind of activities, so say rereading notes or materials, kind of gives the illusion that you understand a lot more than you do. And I'm sure everyone can kind of relate to this, and there's plenty of research that backs up the idea, and this is just one study of many that shows rereading some texts or something like this tends to give the illusion that you understand a lot, whereas answering questions, and in here I should say these are representing questions that they got wrong specifically. So this really gives you a lot of information that not only helps you learn a lot better, but it's actually more accurately, perhaps in some ways, reflecting what you understand. Okay, so another perspective we can bring is questions as a memory modifier, or something that kind of reinforces knowledge or can make follow-up learning more effective. So again, there's a lot of great experimental psychology research on this. So, when you get questions correct, again, this reinforces our memory for things, in long-term memory quite effectively, again, much more effectively than kind of just rereading notes and this sort of thing. And that's all well and good. Another perspective, and I brought this up relating to Tara's comment, is when we get things incorrect, there's increasingly a lot of research that shows that this is very valuable, if not more valuable. And on the one hand, as I've kind of already alluded to a bit, this helps you understand gaps in your understanding, and that can maybe help you plan your future learning. But also, it can act as a bit of what we might call a productive failure that prepares for future learning. So there's all sorts of stuff recently around this kind of testing effect, and how like pre-testing on kind of things, even when you're getting things wrong, even before you really understand it, this pre-testing makes subsequent instruction far more effective. And so this is just like one representative study again here, kind of showing that testing on something before you're even kind of instructed about it, that is like where you're probably more likely to make a bunch of mistakes when you're tested, has quite a reliable effect on subsequent learning. And that's perhaps something that within the PeerWise, the way the PeerWise community sort of engages with this sort of thing, it's typically about sort of consolidation, but there's a flip side to that. Perhaps we can use questions more, maybe previous cohorts questions as kind of pre-test things before lectures and this sort of thing a lot more as well. Okay, so those two perspectives were from the perspective of the question answerer, which is an important perspective. But I think one of the kind of exciting things about PeerWise is it's also about the effect of learning from the perspective of the question creator, right? And specifically within the PeerWise context, I think we can see sort of questioning and explanation as sort of a natural social activity. And I just point to one paper up here. There's been some great work from this group sort of led by the neuroscientist Mariana Sigmund that's kind of made this claim that sort of synthesizing a lot of sort of developmental psychology and all sorts of other things to make this claim that humans are kind of innately wired up to be kind of questioning and explaining. We naturally have this tendency, this like theory of mind idea to infer what other people know. And if they don't know something, to try and explain it or use questions to kind of draw out this kind of difference in understanding. And that we're sort of innately motivated for these kinds of activities. So therefore, like this kind of peer-based approach, on the one hand, can be a sort of more motivating, more authentic activity to engage with in education, where that's a lot more interactional as opposed to like standard lecture formats where it's just this one-way kind of interaction. And just tacking on to that as well, there's increasing attention, I think, in higher ed on how the way we kind of do things as being quite isolating for students. And there's a lot of issues there ranging from mental health to, or even related to that, like we know, like, feelings of isolation kind of, influence the way our brain works and the kind of extent to which we're able to, like, synthesize new informations that is, like, neuroplasticity and this sort of thing. So perhaps, engaging in more social ways of learning can not only help sort of well-being, but maybe sort of support learning a bunch more as well. Yep, and then so sort of final perspective that I'll kind of give here is that when we treat the act of writing questions seriously as a kind of diagnostic tool to find out what someone understands and to point out holes in their understanding, the act of question creation is a really effective way to support and scaffold metacognitive thinking. So, I'll just point out a couple sort of ideas here. So initially, you kind of need to reflect on what needs to be learned. In some cases, the teacher might sort of give them certain content, but in others, like you need to look at in the course, okay, there's this whole sort of wealth of ideas that need to be covered. Like what's out there, what can I choose from? So like kind of reflecting on that. And then there's this layer of reflecting on what's like, so what makes a good question is one that can kind of challenge and uncover these holes in knowledge. So you can kind of reflect on yourself or in discussions with others on like what's challenging, what are the misconceptions, what do people fall for, and also reflecting on different perspectives, why people come up with different answers, why certain things are correct, why certain things are kind of almost correct but maybe missing a key detail. And then there's this, as Paul was saying, the explanation is incredibly important as well. So being able to articulate and explain these kind of differences. So all these different elements kind of emerge naturally from this act of trying to write a good question. And yeah, this is a wealth of research that shows these kinds of activities kind of are very supportive of learning. Though, of course, it's important to point out that in general in this literature, there's also a lot of research that shows that people won't necessarily go deeper into these more reflective activities. So this doesn't come for free per se. But I think with the appropriate supports and scaffolds and sort of clever design, for example, again, like the stuff that Tara was presenting, like, Gareth and I were talking about this kind of issue, earlier this year of like, how can we get students to kind of like reflect on what they know and like think about these misconceptions and talk about them with peers and then use that discussion as a base to jump off to create sort of new questions. So how can we support this kind of reflection? Just summarizing again, like, these different perspectives, the way we can think about these questioning, learning through questioning. And for me, at least, like, this constitutes like ways that we can think about improving how we use PeerWise and similar tools in the future. So, I guess I'll thank you for your time. I'll just leave that up there.